Breaking news. If it bleeds, it leads. In your news today...
You are now tuned in to Dirty Laundry Media.
Stand by.
If it's not obvious to you by now that Joe Biden hates black people, let me run some things by you again. Some in Joe's own words. But first, let me just remind you that since Joe Biden has been in elected office since 1973, when a brother like me was still in diapers, he has not supported any policy that would benefit black Americans specifically. In fact, Joe Biden himself has taken every opportunity to enact legislation which done irreparable harm to the black community. In the 1970s, Joe Biden was one of the Senate's strongest opponents of race integration busing. Not really a bad idea in hindsight, because if black schools in the inner cities were properly funded and functional, they wouldn't have needed to be bused to white schools. Not only has Joe Biden supported harmful legislation in regards to black Americans, he has by his own hands crafted such policy. Not only that, Joe Biden has engaged in slander against the entire black community in his efforts to galvanize support for these insidious and injurious policies, particularly in the realm of so-called criminal justice.
We should focus on them now. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now.
Joe Biden was the Democratic floor manager for the passage of the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984, sponsored by Strom Thurmond, a staunch white supremacist. This bill caused a 32% rise in prisoners and a doubling of residential and commercial property being seized. In 1984, Joe Biden helped pass the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act, also known as the Biden Crime Law, which he has called his most significant legislation. The 1994 crime bill offered grants for new prisons to states who imposed truth in sentencing policies, which imposed mandatory minimums for time served. Initially, the crime bill required states to pass laws mandating violent offenders serve at least 85% of their sentence before those states could receive TIS grant funds. This led to an explosion in state inmate populations. In 1997, the Clinton administration implemented the 1033 program, which transfers excess military equipment to non-military law enforcement agencies. The program legally requires the Department of Defense to make various items of equipment available to law enforcement, which operates in all but one state. So for all you vote blue no matter who, defund the police advocates, just know that Joe Biden has continually supported this policy. In fact, nearly $34 million in military equipment was sent to the police in the first quarter of 2021 under Joe Biden. This was according to the Pentagon's latest figures on the 1033 program. Not only that, but since its inception in 1997, the program has been a conduit for at least $1.8 billion in combat gear shipments from the Department of Defense to U.S. law enforcement agencies. Joe Biden has not had black people's backs as he said he would when he was installed as president, although he stated this loud and clear.
The African American community stood up again for me. You've always had my back. And I'll have yours.
Joe Biden has moved swiftly on behalf of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Joe Biden has moved swiftly on behalf of Native Americans and Alaskan Natives. Joe Biden has moved swiftly on behalf of the LGBTQ community, all while ignoring his most loyal constituency. He has not and will not embrace any push for reparations for the descendants of slavery. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act is dead in the water. And illegal aliens have not only a pass to hop the border, but they have the promise of free travel, room and board upon arrival.
For America. They are the future of America, and we should invest in them. Everybody will benefit from it. Every single American. And you should get used to it. This is a nation of immigrants.
Harming an already severely compromised labor market and depressing wages even further. Oh, the Biden administration is touting its new initiative, a grant program which will use taxpayer dollars to fund crack pipes being distributed in black communities to the tune of $30 million. This, ladies and gentlemen, is Joe Biden's American Rescue Plan.
Early 1990s, urban black communities were suffering from economic collapse. A literal depression was affecting those communities.
We should focus on them now. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now.
The unemployment rate had quadrupled in many urban areas. Neighborhoods that were solidly working class, were suddenly turning into ghettos practically overnight. And
that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created.
And, at that moment, our nation had a choice. We could have responded with bailout packages, economic stimulus plans.
It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth.
We could have invested in those schools so that the young folks trapped in racially segregated communities might have some hope.
They are beyond the pale, many of those people.
Hope of making the rough transition from an industrial economy where they once relied on factory jobs to a service-based economy where they needed actually a college education, even to make it into the middle class.
Beyond the pale.
We could have responded with a wave of care, compassion, and concern, but no.
We have no choice
But to take them out of society.
But no. Instead, what did we get? We got the war on drugs.
They must be taken off the street.
The Get Tough movement, and the evisceration, the end of welfare as we know it.
My opponent drafted the 1994 disaster, the 1994 crime bill, which caused unfair sentencing disparities that devastated black families. And
Are you ashamed of that bill?
Not at all.
Really, the election of Bill Clinton marked the turning point for the Democratic Party, where the Democratic Party decided that in order to win over those so-called white swing voters, the folks who
Back to the streets.
the folks who had defected from the Democratic Party in the wake of the Civil Rights Movement, in order to get those
In
votes.
fact, I drafted the bill, as you remember.
I know that.
They were going to have to begin proving to that segment that they could be tougher on them than the Republicans had been.
But they are in jail.
I think that's a part of our political history that is painful, I think, for the black community to face.
Do we get any credit for what we did?
But it's necessary. And, it's my hope that, as the months and years go by, that we will come to see that politics as usual, where, the black vote is just taken for granted by the Democratic Party, and we're constantly being told, you have to vote for us because, God help you.
They're gonna put y'all back in chains.
If the Republicans are elected, that kind of emotional blackmail and scaremongering, comes to an end.
If you want to pull the major party that is closest to the way you're thinking, to what you're thinking, you must show them that you're capable of not voting for them. If you don't show them you're capable of not voting for them, they don't have to listen to you. I promise you that. I worked within the Democratic Party. I didn't listen or have to listen to anything on the left while I was working in the Democratic Party because the left had nowhere to.
Tonight, we know Joe, but more importantly, Joe knows us.
I'm not going to sit here and say I'm going to do something that's only going to benefit black people. No.
I made it. Stupid bastards.